Hey, Forge fans, it's the Forge Audio Network. I'm your host, Anthony Urciuoli. This is the match day preview. Forge faithful feeling pretty good these days. I don't know if you can, if you can see me, if you're watching. Top of my head, extra shiny this week. I don't know if I've ever, but that's the indication that things are going well. And if you can't see me, maybe you can hear it in my voice. Good times to be a Forge fan. Rallied off a bunch of wins, picking up points in the thick of the race for first place. Even if you're just a neutral fan, playoff races intensifying as we're down to the wire here. There's 10 games left for Forge FC, and they are in a tie for first place. And the team they're playing this week, just 2 points behind them, the rivals, Cavalry FC. Match day is Friday, 9 o'clock. In Foothills County, Alberta. Forge coming off a must-win scenario against Vancouver FC last weekend, in which the boys in orange secured a 2-0 win over the expansion club. They had yet to beat this season. It wasn't a must-win game, I guess, in a technical sense, but in a lot of ways it really was. I mean, you could not afford to drop points to Vancouver for a third time this season. Not at home, not at this stage of the year, not with the races being what they are. We had goals from a pair of super subs, Abubakar Sissoko, Rubens Pasillas finding the back of the net. I don't know what it is about Vancouver. Forge seem to lack a bit of urgency when they play Vancouver, and then are kind of left trying to find that urgency late in the match. It worked out. Late goals. Regardless, they came away with 3 points. They hit all three keys eventually. But Spirit Breakers was one, right? Vancouver seems to play confident against Forge. You can't let them feel confident. The message was score early and often. They didn't score early, but they scored enough, and they certainly carried the play and got superb goaltending from Tristan Henry, which is obviously no surprise at this point. Key number 2 was keep carving Forge as they've been on a roll. Offensively, that attack, it's been fluid, just slicing and dicing and playing so fast. It's Bobby Ball, and it's a winning formula, but it only seems to come out when the team is feeling good, when there's a sense of confidence, because they are human beings, despite a near invincible track record in terms of championships. But so key number 2, keep carving. That's 2 checks, and then they. The third was hit them with the high press, and it was about pressuring Vancouver, susceptible to turnovers in their defensive third, especially from their goaltender. And the high press was going to force Vancouver into mistakes, and it did. So all 3 keys, when you hit all 3, we're talking guaranteed 3 points right there. Before we get into this week's match, some housekeeping, because it's been a pretty big week for news. We'll start with Kyle Becker. CPL announcing Wednesday that Forge FC midfielder Kyle Becker's been named a CPL Player of the Month for the month of July, recording 3 assists. But as you know, and as we've talked about, the stat sheet, forget the stat sheet and where Kyle shows up. I mean, the architect of this club, the attack, everything that happens on the field seems to go through Kyle Becker. He creates as much, if not more, than anybody. And here's a guy who missed, the first few games of the season, came back and has looked better than ever. So, I got into more depth about this last week, but here's the reality. We are so lucky. Anyone involved with this club, whether you're a fan, whether you work for the club, regardless, it is a joy to be able to watch number 10 week in, week out, do the things that he does. And he does things that just no one else can do, because it's not a matter of skill or things that are necessarily taught. There's that X factor. There's just such a high IQ when it comes to this sport. Maybe outside the sport too. I don't know. Probably. Typically those things translate, because to be able to think the game the way he does, I chalk it up to a sign of intelligence. But for all that matters for us is that it works on the field, and it absolutely does. An absolute force, and he does so much. And, face of the franchise, so lucky Hamilton sports fans and Forge fans to have Kyle Forge was 3-0 in the month of July. And Becker's been included in the past 5 consecutive Gatorade Team of the Week squads for the CPL. Oakville native is currently ranked first in assists in the CPL with a total of 6. Again, ranked first despite missing the first few games of the season. But since then, he's been an absolute monster. On a more somber, but it's a bittersweet moment. Veteran Canadian fullback Ashton Morgan announcing his retirement on Monday from pro soccer. The 32-year-old spent the final year and a half of his pro career with Forge FC, lifting the North Star Shield with the club last year, starting and playing 78 minutes in that CPL final against Ottawa, which is a 2-0 win. Toronto native spent most of his pro career with his hometown Toronto FC in Major League Soccer, becoming the first TFC Academy graduate to appear for the Canadian national team in 2011. That's a major, major feat. And Morgan made 168 appearances with TFC over 10 years, winning the MLS Cup and Supporters Shield in 2017 and the Canadian Championship 5 times. Morgan also earned 18 caps for the Canadian men's national team. And we know all he's done for Forge. His last game ever as a pro was with Forge FC, of course, last Friday, the 2-0 win over Vancouver FC. Morgan said, quote, "It's been a hard decision, but it is a beautiful decision for myself and my family and everything for my future right now." Morgan said that to CanPL.ca's Christian Jack. Morgan joined Forge in February 2022, making his debut against Cruz Azul in the CONCACAF Champions League at Tim Hortons Field. He would go on to make 41 appearances for Forge, playing in 2 finals. Final quote from Ashton: "It's been great to play for Hamilton for my last days and my last years and win, coming to this winning club and playing for Bobby and to be with Bex and Borges and all the guys all over again. It's been an amazing experience and I've been so happy to be here." Well, thank you, Ash. Happy that you were here. Congratulations on an amazing career and best of luck going forward. Hopefully Morgan stays connected to the sport because certainly better when he's involved. Also, last news item before we get into this match against Cavalry. Spark Summit is coming up. Club announcing the date of the 2nd annual Spark Summit, aimed to connect and inspire professional women in the sports and entertainment industry. It is on Saturday, September 9th. Stay tuned for announcements of the panelists. All I can say is I attended last year's in more of a working capacity, of course, but even, listen, here's the reality. Even as a male attending this event, I got so much out of it. When you're in your own world, your own bubble, everyone has their own things they're kind of dealing with. Sometimes it can be hard to fully recognize and appreciate what other people are going through. And I heard stories and experiences from women in the sports business, which I've been a part of, mostly in a media capacity, but things that I just never had to worry about or think about or consider. And it's getting, they're eye openers when you hear some of these experiences. So even for me, I got a lot out of it, just listening and just kind of being a part of it. So for anyone that's interested in attending, again, still more kind of things to iron out. It is about 5 weeks away now, but just go to forgefc.ca for information. And if you need more information, just go to the contact area, contact the club, and you will be directed in the appropriate direction. All right. Friday night, 9:00. Cavalry, Forge, rivalry renewed. 2 fan bases that I will say, Forge, they have a few, they've built up some rivalries, and you'll do that as a club that has been a dynasty club is going to have a lot of rivals for obvious reasons. The Cavalry one, though, there's something a little different about that one, a little more hostile. We know the rivalry with York, the one that's been built with Ottawa, with Pacific. I mean, half the league essentially at this point, Forge has built rivalries with, but there's something about the Cavalry one where it's just Cavalry wants to be what Forge is. Cavalry FC, if we just take the regular season, Cavalry is the best club in CPL history, the most successful regular season club in CPL history. But what kills them, what kills the fans, the coaching staff, the players that have been there for long enough, is that they haven't won a championship. Forge, despite finishing behind them in the regular season standings multiple times, have these 3 titles and these 4 title appearances. I mean, Cavalry was so close to being the first ever CPL champion, and that's something you can't, to be the first ever CPL champion. I mean, that is by definition a one-shot deal, and that is Forge FC, and it could have been Cavalry. There's just so much about this rivalry that has developed over the years. And for me, it's the most enjoyable rivalry of all the clubs. And I love that it's not a geographical one. You know, the rivalry with York was going to be there. Let's be honest. No matter how these matches went, no matter how many times they played each other, that rivalry was kind of built in, right? It's the 905 Derby. It's just there organic, or it's there by default because they're local. And now, of course, they've had some big matches and things like that. But when you're geographical rivals, the rivalry is just kind of, it's inevitable. What's nice about these rivalries with teams like Cavalry is they have to develop. I mean, bad blood really has to develop in order to get to a point where you have fan bases that just really don't like each other. And this is one of them. And so Friday night, it should be a lot of fun in Calgary, or Calgary-ish, Alberta, let's say, Foothills County. So let's get into the stats here. The table going into this match, Forge FC in second place with 29 points. Now they are tied for first, but Pacific has the edge in the tiebreaker because they played one less match. Cavalry has also played one less match than Forge, and they're 2 points back. They're in third place. So what that means is Cavalry's looking at this saying, we win, we're in first place, first of all, and we leapfrog Forge. We could do it at home, and you know this is going to be a hungry Forge. Or, well, I mean, both clubs should be hungry, but Cavalry at home, they're chomping at the bit. And so Forge is going to have to be aware of that. When you look at Forge, though, the best road team in the CPL. They have 16 points in 9 matches, +4 in their goal differential, 5 wins in 9 matches and a draw. I mean, they're tied with York, but they have the edge with their goal differential. So Forge right now, the best road team. Cavalry, the third best home club, and it's very tight. They have 15 points in 8 matches. They're just 1 point behind Atletico and Halifax for the top spot, just in terms of home records. So Cavalry, pretty good at home. Just 1 loss this year at their home stadium. They have 4 wins and 3 draws. So a tough out on their home pitch. Head-to-head, all-time, it's kind of remarkable that, I mean, we're 4.5 years into this league, and they've already played each other 22 times. Forge winning 10 of them, 6 draws. Cavalry's won 6. So Forge with the edge. And the head-to-head series this year, I mean, it's completely even. The first time they played back in April, at the beginning of the year, Forge Cavalry 2-2. And remember, Forge had to erase a couple of deficits there. June 3rd was the second time they met a couple of months ago. That was a 1-1 draw at Cavalry. So this is the next one, and they'll have one more in September. So all even so far. And Forge, they have not lost to Cavalry in 5 straight matches. Unbeaten against Cavalry in 5. Cavalry's gone 8 matches against Forge without a clean sheet. So Forge has scored in 8 straight matches against Cavalry. And you know what? That was a silly stat to give because it goes both ways. Let's forget that for a second. Here's a better stat that kind of paints the picture. In 6 of the 8 matches with these clubs, there have been more than 2.5 goals, and both teams have scored in 8 straight matches against each other. So neither team is doing much with the clean sheet. So we'll eliminate the clean sheet stat and just say both teams have scored in 8 straight matches. Cavalry, though, first to score in 5 of the last 7. So Forge has had to battle from behind. And again, one of those, it's just Cavalry's frustration with Forge is they can't ever seem to really put Forge away and get over that hump. Also, 9 of the last 10 matches between these clubs, there have been more than 4.5 bookings, and that's well above average. So 9 of the last 10, not surprising. These two clubs are heated. Also, officials may be quick to book just to kind of keep things settled. That might play a part in it as well, but always test the affairs with these two clubs. Now, we'll get into it more when we get into the 3 keys, but it's worth noting Cavalry is very efficient. They score in nearly 19% of their attempts on target. Now, 19%. Just as a reference, Forge is around 13%. Cavalry leads the league with just being efficient. When they get opportunities, nearly 1 out of every 5 times they are scoring, and that is that's tops in the league in terms of goal conversion. Now, we mentioned him earlier. It bears repeating. Kyle Becker, our captain, has the best player rating according to SofaScore. Now, player ratings, they take all things into account: completed passes, goals, shots, tackles. It's kind of it's a score out of 10, and it's this all-encompassing. Everything you do adds and subtracts. When you make mistakes and maybe give away a bad challenge, whatever, you kind of lose points, and that's the way that scale works. Becker has the highest player rating in the CPL right now, according to SofaScore, at 7.39 out of 10. So worth noting, by the way, Mandrakar James, Forge defender, is 6th on the list as a defender. He's at 7.16, but Beck's at the very top. And that rating is really a reflection on how complete your game is. I mean, I guess the exception would be if you're just scoring like an absolute madman, then you'd be high up there too, and because those are weighted obviously more. But Kyle, the fact that he hasn't scored a ton of goals this year shows how complete his game is, because that rating is so high. It means he's just doing everything right and making very few mistakes. Ball possession is going to play a big role in this one, because these are the top 2 possession clubs in the league. And it's been this way, by the way, for the last 4+ years. It's always Forge, Cavalry in terms of average ball possession per match. Forge is at 56.6% per match. Cavalry is at 56. So very close. 2 teams that like to possess the ball. Obviously, you can't have both clubs over 50%. The math doesn't work out. So something usually has to give. And recently, it's been Cavalry giving up possession and trying to beat Forge in other ways. But we're going to get to that in a bit. Some other key stats. Big chances created. Ali Musi, tied for first in the league right now with 8. He's tied with Ayman Salouf. Kyle Becker, by the way, just 1 back at 7. Again, he missed a few games. I would say he would probably easily be at the top. I mean, he's only 1 back of Ali Musi this year in big chances created, and Becker's missed a few matches. So I'm just playing the laws of averages here. So Musi's going to be a big part of this. Becker, of course, and even Tristan Borges, David Chouanier are both in the top 8 in big chances created, and we know that these guys, they're not playing 90 minutes week in, week out because of the depth on this squad and because of the way Bobby likes to use that depth and keep guys fresh and use that depth to the club's advantage. I mean, it's there, which makes these numbers even more impressive because, they're playing fewer minutes than a lot of the guys that are on this list. And last stat I'll give you, we'll toot Kyle's horn a little more. He also is tied for the league lead in key passes per match. So key passes, essentially, key passes that lead to a scoring opportunity that create, not surprisingly, Becker at the top of the stat category there with 2.3 per match. All right, Kyle's great. We know it. But in case you needed proof, there was more. All right, To get more of a Cavalry perspective, let's bring in our guests for this week, Calgary Sun and Calgary Herald sports editor and columnist Todd Saloff. He's been covering Cavalry since day one, and he joins us now. All right, Todd. It's parody's always been a big feature of the CPL, and I don't know if this is some kind of recency bias kind of taking over my brain, but this year seems to be especially tight to the point where you could drop 5 spots with a single loss. Just as someone who follows the league, you kind of get the same feeling that it seems just to be a little tighter this year than most.
Yeah, especially the first part of the year for sure. I mean, it seemed like Pacific kind of took off, and everybody else was kind of fighting around and jumping around there at the beginning of the year, and it's kind of back and forth. And it's kind of funny now because there for a while it looked like the usual 3 were going to take off from everybody else, but now they've kind of settled in a little bit, and others are coming on them too. It's been fun to watch that way, and it's great to see because it's been too many years where there's been teams that have been out of it too early, and that doesn't make for a lot of fun.
Right. The extra playoff team kind of helps. So, what are your thoughts on the new page playoff system? That you get to the 5th team, so you get kind of a play-in game, and essentially the top 2 clubs get 2 paths to the final. It's a little more confusing for the fans, but do you think this kind of increases some of the maybe interest down the stretch when you do have that extra playoff team?
Yeah, I think anytime you can have a playoff race that goes down longer than usual, that's what you want. I mean, you look at the CFL. That's just the way it's always been. You're never out of it in that league until right to the end, and that's what you want if you want to keep your people happy. I know in recent years baseball's been come around to that way of thinking, and I think that's really helped because halfway through a season for a lot of teams in baseball, it was always they're done a quarter of the way into the season. They haven't got a chance to make it with so little playoff spots and so many teams. So when you've got a small league as the CPL might be, you know what? You're given your chance. You're given hope to teams right down to the end, and especially when you have three points for a win, as soccer does.
Attendance is up around the league, which is great. Cavalry included. I'm always curious about the league's reception in different markets. What's kind of maybe paint us the picture of the fan base, the support, kind of the game day atmosphere? What is kind of the temperature of the club in that region?
Well, I mean, you're right. It's up, and they slowly built a product where it's going up and up every year. I think the whole league, as well as Cavalry, is fortunate that COVID didn't do so much damage to the point where the league would collapse. It was just, I don't know, maybe it was just fortunate timing on their part that they came in with maybe relative low expectations for the first few years, and since then they've kind of built on it a little bit and a little bit at a time, and it's going up. Game day experience around Atco Field is awesome. There's a lot to do. Spruce Meadows, the venue, which is a world-class equestrian venue, itself is fantastic. There's so many little things for families and kids and the soccer fan to enjoy before the game, after the game, during the game. Little places where you can just go and hang out. There's no one spot in the stadium that's the same as another spot in the stadium because it's so strange the way it's laid out. One side is a great big grandstand. The ends are, one end is basically ground where the chairs set up. The other end is where the foot soldiers supporters group is, and you're right on top of the players there. And then the west side stands. There's no real stands there. That's kind of the VIP area, which is a little more laid back, a little further away from the action. So it really is a different atmosphere when you go there. And if you take in different parts of the stadium, that you're going to see a totally different experience and have a totally different feeling as to how to watch a game.
So, can you give us a sense of kind of the geography of Foothills County, where the stadium's located, and kind of how it connects to the larger markets in the area?
Well, Spruce Meadows is just south. I mean, you say Foothills County, it doesn't really mean much around here because, I
Okay.
mean, Spruce Meadows is right on the edge of Calgary. It's across to the east and to the north are communities across the major roads, and one of the major roads to the north is Stony Trail. That's your bypass road all the way around the city. That's your ring road all the way around the city. That takes a lot of traffic in. It's still being constructed in the northwest corner of the city, but in the last 2 years now, last year and a half, something like that, it has opened up to the point now where people in the northwest can get down rather easily to the south end of the city without taking a lot of time. Before, you had to come a roundabout way to get there, and it made Spruce Meadows kind of an off settling place to get to. But now with the ring road, you can get there pretty much anywhere in half an hour tops. So it makes it easier to get to. It's easy to get in and out of once you're there. They do concentrate on bringing people in via mass transit, which is something it's kind of the lost art in sports these days. You always want that. I'm not sure what Hamilton has in that regard and what the Ticats and Forge do, but I remember growing up in Edmonton how important it was for us to be able to get on a bus to go to Commonwealth Stadium from pretty much anywhere in the city, and that just isn't. It's not the same thing anymore in places like that, and I don't know if that's the same as other CFL cities, versus even cities like this or versus a CPL, but they do a really good job of getting you to the area, and if you want to drive, you can drive just as easily too.
Yeah, it's there are challenges here too. It's almost the Canada wide transit's one of those things that we're I think as a country we're kind of behind on. Maybe Quebec's a little bit different, but no, it's interesting. My favorite part of a Cavalry Forge match, as we get kind of more into the game now, is it's that midfield battle. Now particularly seeing how Forge's midfield competes to slow down guys like Ali Musi specifically. It appears anyway that Musi is that straw that kind of mixes the Cavalry build and attack, so to speak. Is that how it's been this season?
Yeah, there's been a lot of buzz about Ali Musi, and maybe getting back to your first the talk about us versus the rest of the world in terms of mass transit. I mean, we just don't do it like Europe, do we? I mean, it just doesn't
Oh yeah.
happen that way. But um, as far as Musi goes, yeah, he's getting a lot of buzz around the league, and rightfully so. He's been an MVP for this team, and he's right up there in the MVP category when it comes to the league. But by no means is he the only guy that creates the offense. I mean, especially when he mixes with Camargo, Sergio Camargo, who is classified as a midfielder, but he plays up and he plays. He is so creative, and when he's on the pitch, he makes a lot of things happen himself. And then and you've got your strikers with Meyer Bevan and Joe Mason up front. The four of them are big when it comes to creating what's necessary up front. And then young Gauthier Natigny, who has pushed his way into prominence and on the up front for Cavalry. He's a guy who can make things happen with his speed and his ability as well. So suddenly they have a lot more creativity up front. But Musi is getting most of the buzz. There's no doubt about that.
Well, one player that Forge won't have to deal with. It's going to be kind of weird having him not in a Cavalry Forge match. The thorn in everyone's side, Jose Escalante was. I mean, how has that transition been post Escalante after that kind of confusing leave of absence and eventual loan to his home league in Honduras?
Well, I mean, he's a loss for sure, and no doubt. I think you can ask him point blank, and he'll tell you Forge was his favorite team to play against.
Mm-hmm.
because he just likes being a thorn in the side, like you said. That's a good way to put it. He's just he's pretty. He can be pretty vicious out there, and he knows how to push buttons for any team, especially Forge. But I got to tell you, they've manufactured pretty well without him. They've done a good job of making things work without him. A guy like Fraser Aird is getting a little more time. He's kind of become what Jose Escalante was this year in terms of that guy down the wing. Um, Aird has got such amazing touch into the box from what he's considered now a defender, but he plays that wing. And he plays, he's, on paper, he's a midfielder, and that's what he's been. But Fraser Aird just is able to punch the ball into the box, unlike few can in the league. And then the other guy that they've got helping out at that midfield position down the other side is Ben Fisk as well. And those two guys, both of those guys have got such big touch when it comes to the offense. Um, and then the other guy and we were talking about it today at training. Is I talked to young Jesse Daly. He's from Australia, and he's kind of Jose Escalante light. He has become he's aggressive. Everybody says his number one trait is he's aggressive and he's not afraid of anything, and he's quick, and he's playing right in the middle of the field. Um, and he's kind of been forced to pick up a lot of the slack because of the injuries and the losses, such as Jose, that Cavalry has had. So Jesse Daly, you can watch this guy's number 8. He's in the middle. He really does know how to pursue the ball, and he gets there quickly, and he covers a lot of ground, and he's not afraid of anything. And like I said, he smiles too, like Jose used to, in terms of when he attacks the ball, attacks a player. He's not afraid to show you that he's damn happy to do it.
Well, it's never not entertaining when these two clubs get together, so we can expect more of the same Friday night. Todd Saloff, thanks so much for doing this, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again.
Yeah, sounds good, Anthony. I appreciate you hooking me up. It looks like you said, another great Friday night between these two teams. I don't expect it'll be a boring game whatsoever.
All right, time for our 3 keys to the match for Forge FC on the road, taking on Cavalry FC. Some big time points on the line Friday night in Foothills County. Key number 1 for Forge: always aware. Forge and Cavalry have regularly ranked 1 and 2 in average ball possession over the last 4+ seasons. Something has to give with only so much of the ball to go around. Last season, Cavalry surprised Forge in the playoffs with a more defensive tactical approach, deploying a low block and looking for offense on the counter. Here's the bottom line. If you're Forge, all thirds need to be accounted for when you're in possession. You obviously can't always anticipate changes of possession. So the boys will just have to be proactive, aware of where they are on the pitch and who's around them to avoid giving up big chances on the counter. Key number 2 for Forge FC: lock down D. Forge FC, known for their offense, also an elite defensive club. Lead the CPL in clean sheets on the strength of the greatest goalkeeper this league has ever seen, Tristan Henry. Cavalry plays a similar ball control style as Forge this season. I mentioned it. Cavalry's been very efficient. They turn nearly 19% of their opportunities into goals. That's first in the league. So Forge will it'll be a full 90 defensive effort from Forge if they want to slow that down or prevent it. Cavalry has not needed a lot of opportunities to score, so Forge can't afford any lapses in focus on that defensive side of the ball. Key number 3 for Forge: mute Moosey. Cavalry midfielder Ali Moosey tied for the league lead in big chances created, one of the most dangerous 1v1 players in the league. He won't hesitate to dribble past his man with the most talented and deepest all-around midfield in the CPL. Forge will need a box-to-box effort from their guys to eliminate Moosey's space. His aggressive approach means he's also susceptible to turnovers. So that's something Forge can use to their advantage. All right, those are your 3 keys. You are set for the week. All that's left is for the match to be played in Calgary. Listen, I'm excited for it. You should be too, because it always is. It's always entertaining when these two clubs get together, and Friday will be no exception. I am very confident. By the way, when the match ends, the second you hear that final whistle, even a little bit before the final whistle, go to the Forge FC YouTube channel and check out the live match in review. Instant reaction, as instant as you could possibly get, and that'll be immediately following that match. So until then, enjoy whatever you're doing between now and match day, and we'll talk to you Friday night.